Welcome back to my channel. I'm Brian Kafke, and this is lesson 32 of my Master Databricks and Apache Spark series. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about Koalas, which is basically let you run Pandas on Spark. And I'd like to ask you to join my inner circle by joining my Patreon network. Link in the description. You'll get a lot of benefits, but the most important thing is you get direct access to me, and I get to get closer to you and help you even more than I can on my YouTube channel alone. Thank you. So the short description of what Koalas is that it is a package or a library of functions that you use in place of Pandas so that you automatically get Sparkified. So you're going to be automatically able to take your code that you wrote for just regular Python locally on using Pandas, and now it's going to use Spark data frames instead. So you can jumpstart and take your code and you're good to go very, very quickly. This documentation links here available in the notebook, and as always my notebook will be available. You can click a link in the descriptions and it will take you to this notebook. You can bring it in and run it yourself. It's in DBC format, so that's the Databricks compressed notebook format. So let's start off with okay, why Koalas? What's the big deal? Why do we care? Well, it is a game changer because the idea is that we can take existing Python code that uses Pandas and we don't have to learn a new API. The problem with PySpark is it's different, right? And you got to learn what the differences are in the functions and on and on. But with this, you just take it and drop it in and you're good to go. Well, not completely, but it does ease the migration a huge amount. Very few code changes. And that's really the idea here, right? It eases the migration from using your ordinary Python code using Pandas to Spark. And of course, that's really important for Databricks because they want everyone to use Databricks and Spark. There's almost no code changes. You just swap out the old module Pandas in place of Koalas. And Koalas implements almost all of the widely used APIs and features you know and love in Pandas, such as plotting, grouping, windowing, yada, 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 on and on. So it's pretty cool. It does a lot of that. In addition, Koalas APIs such as transform, batch apply, blah, blah, blah. This is talking about basically that you can run your functions. You can write a nice Pandas function and then push it out to the cluster and run it in parallel on the nodes. And it has features that make this easier and uses the latest, greatest APIs, including the Python user-defined functions. What is Koalas? Well, I put this link here, and if you go to that link, you'll see a really nice blog that explains what's going on, why Koalas, what it gives you, etc. Key thing here is easy transition from Pandas to Apache Spark. That's really the goal of Koalas. It's a pretty nifty idea. I think it's cool. One of the things is this blog is actually a year and a half old, so I'm sure it's a lot better now. But even looking at this, you can see some really important things. You can see that we have the data frame here, right? The purple shows you that since 0.1 to 1.0, it went from like under 20% support to 82%. Series, the red line, went even lower, but now it's up to 74%, and the support for indexing is also really high. So you've got a lot of improvements very quickly. If we look at the download history, it's also very interesting. It's almost a 45-degree angle, right, going straight up, starting from only 2019, right, April 2019 to now, and the downloads are going up pretty fast, and it seems to be increasing. So let's go back and now let's try it out. It's like, okay, you told me all this stuff, Brian. That's great. I got links in here and all this stuff, but I want to see it work. So the first thing we're going to do is bring in the libraries we need. First, I want to bring in the Pandas library. So here's Pandas, but I also need NumPy. I want to use matplotlib because I want to be able to do some plots. So I want to do this. This is typically what you would do in a Jupyter notebook. Now I notice here it says, wait, matplotlib notebook is not supported in Databricks. Try using matplotlib inline instead. Okay, so that's just an incompatibility in Databricks itself, the notebooks. So I'm going to run that cell. I'm using Control Enter. Run that cell and you can see, okay, now I've got that working. So I'm good for Pandas. Now I need to bring in the Koalas library. So I'm going to say import. The library name on Databricks is databricks.koalas. And I'm just going to give it a prefix of KS as opposed to the traditional PD for Pandas, right? So KS means Koalas and PD means Pandas. As I mentioned, this is already automatically installed in the cluster, so you shouldn't have to do any installation for that. We're going to bring in a file for this. So just so you're aware, we can use a file system command by doing ls. The files are stored where we put them in video 10, which is automatically to go to file store/tables. Where are files? So if you are looking for them, you can do something like that and see if you can find your file. A couple of migration notes as before we run into more code is be sure to change any Pandas module prefixes from PD to KS if you're trying to take advantage of Koalas. Be careful to change all of your Pandas data frame names to the correct Koala data frame names. And a best practice, I think, is to change the prefixes, have a prefix, which is clearly distinguishable from a local Pandas data frame to a Spark or Koalas data frame. And I'll show you my convention for that. The PD function didn't seem to work in all my use cases. I'm not showing you all the code that I've tested so far, but I did hit a case where it didn't like replacing PD and making a function call for a data frame with KS and doing the same. So instead, I found if I took the data frame, the Koalas data frame, and then did dot and used the Pandas method, it worked fine. And that is oftentimes two ways you can do things, right? You can call the Pandas data frame like PD function and then pass the data frame in, or you can just say data frame dot method. So something to be aware of. You may want to play with that if you have problems. We do get the tab lookup support, so we can use Code Complete to get help with what's available for us to use, so we can do that kind of thing, which is nice, and we get that with Pandas as well. We also can say help KS because we've imported the library, and we'll get all kinds of support. And mind you, this is a lot of support, what functions are there, all kinds of good stuff. And we can say help and give it a function name, ks dot whatever function, and we got nice documentation here. So we really don't have to go far to get help with what we need. We probably won't have to go to Google or anything to get what we need, so that's handy. So let's jump in and start doing real coding. We're going to do, again, back and forth. I'm going to create a local Pandas LP data frame df underscore sales, and that's my prefix. If it's a local Pandas data frame, I want an LPDF, so I know that's what it is, and I'm going to read this just using the good old read underscore CSV, and I'm giving it the path, and I'm saying I'm going to subset rows to just 2000 because I really don't want to have to bring in the whole file. Bear in mind this thing here too. I'm saying instead of dbfs colon, I'm saying slash dbfs slash. That's a Databricks thing, kind of weird, but it works because dbfs technically isn't something I think of as being part of the path. So I'm going to take that exact statement. I just cut and pasted it to see if it would work with Koalas, and you can see I'm creating skdf Spark Koalas data frame underscore sales, doing the exact same code. Oh my God, what happened? It didn't like it. So what happened is it says this doesn't exist. Well, it turns out that's just a difference in the way Databricks uses paths when it comes to Python. But if you take out the slash dbfs slash and just make it slash file store, so slash dbfs goes away and you just continue with the rest of it, it works fine. Now we got Pandas again. We want to just, I'm going to take the simplest function possible. I'm just going to say, show me two rows using the head method. And there it is. Let's do the same thing using Koalas. Now mind you, if this failed, I'd be like walking away. This is terrible, but it worked great. And it looks, the output looks identical too, which I really like. Now let's confirm our data frames are what they appear to be. So we want to make sure, yep, the LPDF is a Pandas data frame, Pandas core. And let's see what the Koalas one says. Databricks Koalas data frame. So I will call your attention to, this doesn't just say Spark data frame. There's some special magic wrapped around this data frame. It is a Spark data frame under the covers somewhere, but it's Koalas, so there's differences. Okay, in this example, what I want to do is I want to go into LPDF sales. I want to use the dtypes method, and I'm going to list a few of these data types just to see what it looks like. And we can see that we've got order dates, etc., and they're int64s. Do the same thing to our Koalas data frame, and we get the same output. Looks good, but one thing I do want to call your attention to is it mapped to int64s here in Pandas, but int32s in Koalas. So just be aware of, there is a mapping that goes on. Pandas data types are different than what Spark supports, and so you will have a mapping going on. It's translating behind the scenes, and you can have differences. So be aware of that because it could have differences in behavior, which could be subtle and something to watch out for. Okay, let's start looking more at the syntax. I'm going to, again, local data frame. I want to pull out a single column. So I use the dot notation, dot sales amount. That's a column I want. And I'm going to run some summary statistics on that. Looks good. Let's try the same thing, but this time it's a Koalas data frame, our sales data frame, and looks good. I'm going to do the same thing, but instead of getting a summary statistics for everything, I'm just going to do the mean function. And I'm going to run this with Shift Enter and Shift Enter and see how that looks. And again, looks good, but you'll notice it's slightly different in terms of how it rounded. Now let's just say, okay, can I use the bracket syntax to pull out a column? Let's do it for both. And the one thing I would notice is, yes, it works, but the Pandas API kind of does a nice job. It just gives you a few rows and then gives you the ending rows because there's 2,000 columns, right? But here, it gives you everything, and you can scroll down and scroll down for quite a while because you're going to get all 2,000 rows back. So just be aware of that. Here we want to filter out. So we're going to say our data frame and our filter criteria in brackets, and I'll just list a few rows. And that worked great. And can I do the same thing in Koalas? Yep, works fine. So far it looks pretty good because it's matching the syntax I would expect. One of the things I want to test it, well, can I index columns? Can I actually slice it based on rows? So I want to take from 0 to 3, right, which gives me 0, 1, 2. And then can I also then attack on the column name, and does that syntax work? And it worked fine here, and you'll see Koalas does fine too. Let's take this a step further. I want to select columns by index. So I'm going to do the typical, I'm using the iLook method of Pandas. This colon means I'm just going to take all rows, but I only want columns 1 and 2 based on what's in the brackets, and I'll just select a few rows so I can take a look at that. I can do the same thing in Koalas, and that works fine, so great. Almost through. This is again just a quick pass to see how does it work overall. I think it's looking pretty good. Here I'm going to be taking the index rows 1 to 5, right? And I'm going to be pulling 2 columns out, and I'll just run through both of these quick, and that looks great too. I don't really see a problem with that, so great. One of the things people do a lot, obviously, with Pandas is setting indexes. So I did want to do a quick test with that. So taking our local data frame, I'm going to do a set index. I'm going to change it to the sales order number, and I don't want to lose the column in the data frame, so I'm going to say drop equal false. I'm going to do that in both the local and the Koalas data frames and see that everything works. So we can see we do have the index change. Now we've got our index on the left, everything's sorted that way, great, and we retained it in our data frame here. So that's great, and it worked in both places. It's retained, and we have our index set on the left. So that worked perfect. So what are some takeaways from this? Well, we saw that for our test, the Pandas syntax was 100% match, or almost 100%. A little finagling with the path, but I put that more on Databricks notebooks than I do on Koalas. Code changes to switch, again, we sort of reiterating that, but basically the code changes were minimal. And I did want to kind of promote the idea of using name prefixes on our data frame so that we can tell which is a local data frame versus which one is a Koalas. And even a Spark data frame I would name a little differently, because as we saw, Koalas is a sort of wrapper around a Spark data frame, so it's not exactly the same. That's it for this video. So I want to thank you. Please like, share, subscribe. I appreciate all the support I've gotten. And if you are up for it, then please support me on Patreon. Link in the description. I appreciate the support because it allows me to keep doing more of what I love, which is doing these videos to help people skill up. Thank you.